Assalamu alaikum. So I want to start off this topic by just listing out three premises and then hopefully forming an argument, and then later on also giving some opinions. So I want to start off by a premise by saying that every single organism on this earth, yeah, coming from a second point of view, yeah, their carnal, their most basal instincts derive from survival and reproduction, yeah. So every single organism's primary objective is for survival and reproduction, and they'll try to achieve that. Okay, we can see this all the way down from bacteria all the way up to the highest, biggest, largest mammals that we know, the most complex mammals, right? I'm sure everyone can agree with that. Now, another premise that I would like to make is that, and I'll give you some points to prove this, is that an organism will only expend the least amount of energy so much as it ensures survival and reproduction. So it's not going to go out of its way. It's actually going to go and make sure that it does not spend any extra energy in the form of calories, yeah, so that it maintains survival and reproduction. I'll start off by giving just an example from bacteria, I suppose the smallest organisms, then I'll go and give examples from humans and you will understand what I'm talking about. So, among bacteria, there are a class of bacteria called escapum um, bacteria, and you can search it up, ESCAPPM. Okay, and we know that what happens when someone has an infection with bacteria. Yeah? We give them an antibiotic. Let's say in this case, these bacteria, yeah, we can give them penicillins. What do penicillins do? Penicillins go and they disrupt the formation of the cell wall of the bacteria so that the bacteria doesn't grow and doesn't divide. Well, okay, so that's how sort of they work. But these bacteria are kind of smart. They're smart. So these ones actually produce a little protein. It's called beta lactamase. What that does is it actually goes to the penicillin and it disables it so that the penicillin itself does not go and stop this bacteria from forming its cell wall. Essentially, it stops it from dividing. So now what happens? The funny thing about these bacteria is that they don't always make this beta lactamase. So this protein that stops the penicillin from working, it doesn't make it. The only time it makes it is when it is induced, meaning it senses the bacteria when they sense the presence of the penicillin. Now, why is that? Well, it follows through that principle that an organism does not want to expend energy or wants to expend the least amount of energy so far as to ensure survival and reproduction. Yeah, because that little beta lactamase, the one that stops the penicillin, that's costly. Yeah, it needs to make it out of little proteins, right? And to come and build the proteins together, you need energy plus raw material, so it's costly. And it does not make it unless it's sensitive, so unless it's induced by the penicillin itself. Now, why is that funny? If we apply that to human context, that's like someone who, as a preventative measure from, I don't know, a robber or a thief, they go and they purchase a gun, let's say, as the thief is approaching them, rather than having it there already, waiting for that occasion to happen. Why? It's because we don't know if that occasion is going to happen. And secondly, the gun is costly. There's no need to get it now. That's sort of what's happening in the escapement context, right? It might not make a lot of sense to us, but it underlines that principle that an organism expends the absolute least amount of energy that it can in order to ensure survival and reproduction, to the point where it literally will not make that little protein, that beta lactamase, yeah, which ensures its survival essentially, unless it knows that the robbers come. Yeah, you think that's something crazy, you know, if we extrapolate it to the context of humans. Now, in humans, how does this translate? A human who's simply following the most basal and carnal desires is also going to follow that trope. So, what's going to happen? You'll notice it's a lot harder to be lean and in shape than it is to be fat. Why? Because to be lean, you need to actively stop yourself from going and seeking out energy or calories. Yeah. Now, this is another thing. So they'll expend only as much energy to ensure survival and reproduction, but that also means that should there be a situation where they can easily get resources, they'll get them and they will essentially have an unsatiable appetite, right? That's why it's much easier to be fatter, because when you eat, yeah, we have all these reward systems in our brain, and they tell us to constantly eat. Why do they exist? Why do we have these pathways hardwired into us? It's because that helps us in that survival and reproduction, because we're storing as much energy as we can. Yeah, it's good. It's your body does not want you to be lean. It does not want you to be skinny. Yeah, because that is an energy deprived state. Now, what else? When we want to exercise, is it fun? Is it more fun, more exciting? Is it easier to go exercise, or is it easier to sit and do nothing? Of course, sit and do nothing, yeah? Because the organism does not want to expend energy. It does not want to needlessly expend energy. It will only expend so far as that it ensures survival and reproduction. Now, muscles. If someone is a large person and they have a lot of muscles, what happens if they stop working out? Again, they go and they shrink. They lose a lot of their muscles. Why? Because muscles are metabolically expensive. They use energy. If your body's thinking, okay, this person is not using as much of these muscles as he did before. So why am I keeping all this muscle when it's not required for the survival? Yeah? You get bigger, it's because you use your muscles and then your body understands. This is probably because of an external stress in the environment. And this organism is stressed simply because it is a survival stress. So it needs this, we need to fortify him so that he may be able to, or she, that they may be able to endure this calamity or this very hard stress, right? Same thing with your bones, yeah? What's the best sort of exercise that we recommend for people who have osteopenia, for example? Yeah, you can take the vitamin D, the calcium, but when you actually apply stress to your bones, they fortify again. So you stress your body and it responds, but it will absolutely not, and it will do the exact opposite. It will not fortify anything that you have unless it feels like it needs it for the purpose of survival. Okay? That's why it's much easier to be lazier, fatter, unmotivated. Why? Because all these things are energy costly. An organism, unless it perceives that the expenditure of this energy is absolutely necessary for its survival, it will not spend that energy. Now, so I'm sure this is all agreed upon. Now, how does this relate to the two sexes, men and women? Well, we can think of the energy that an organism has as being partitioned across its body. Alright, so there's compartments. We know, for example, this is a known fact. I don't know if it's actually exact measures, but the brain is responsible for uptaking 20% of the caloric needs of the organism. Okay, and then you can also say whatever the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, the musculoskeletal system. Anyways, all systems. Yeah, the point is they require a specific amount of energy that is partitioned towards them, such as they function. Now, remember, back to the two premises, okay? The most important one is that the organism will expend only as much energy as required to maintain survival and reproduction. Okay, now, men and women, anatomically, there is a huge difference between them, okay? Woman, man, she has a womb. What does the womb consist of? The reproductive system. You have your ovaries, your fallopian tubes going down into the actual uterus, the vagina itself, all this reproductive, the whole hormonal system that's used to control and regulate that system. What is that? It's very energy costly. Actually, if we look down at the microscopic level, something that's very interesting, yeah? Look at videos of a sperm fertilizing an egg. You'll see that the egg, the ova, is actually much larger. It's a much bigger cellular hardware than the sperm is. Why? Because the egg, the ova itself, actually carries all the organelles that the subsequent offspring's going to have. The sperm, all it does is goes, delivers, essentially injects its genetic code, but the egg also contains all the organelles, the mitochondria, the Golgi apparatus, the endoplasmic reticulum. Also, if you guys know biology, you know what I'm talking about. But the egg contains all of that. So even at that level, it's more costly. From the microscopic to the macroscopic level, yeah? Women have this room. Now, what, if you're following me up until this point, what does this mean? It means that this extra biological hardware that the women have, yeah, means that energy is being partitioned towards them. I don't know exactly how much energy, but so in the male organism, due to the lack of such complex hardware, yeah, that energy is being partitioned elsewhere because they're only. I'm not saying that they expend equal amounts of energy, but they expend only so far as to ensure survival and reproduction, right? So now, what does this mean? It means that the male is lacking. So the male is deficient when it comes to the reproductive aspect because they don't have that, and there's no energy that can even go and be partitioned there. But they have differences in their brain. They have differences in their muscles, their lung capacity, their bones. Okay, all of these things. they are physically generally larger, right? Because, and on top of that, generally, when I was talking about that energy, males actually are able to get more energy than a female. They consume more food. That's been a biological fact. So not only do males start off and have more energy than females, they have more caloric, the most basal form of energy, so more calories. They've always, and they always essentially will do, and they have a desire for more energy. But actually, more of that energy is also being used elsewhere in their body, as opposed to females who they intake less energy, and at the same time, of that less energy, a good portion of it is being partitioned towards their reproductive system. So what does that tell you? All that other excess energy in the male, it's not going to waste. It cannot go to waste because why? We said in our first premise that the energy expenditure will go to places so far as it ensures survival and reproduction. So therefore, there are qualities necessarily. There are qualities that the man has that the woman does not have. And there are qualities, we know the qualities that the woman, she has a woman. She has the ability to reproduce. Okay? And before delving into conjecture, everything that I've stated so far, in my opinion, if someone who's reasonable listens to it, they can agree. I can talk about conjectures from here on and say, well, men are, their brain capacity allows them to rotate 3D objects differently, we're better at math, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's leave that aside. Once we understood that point, so there are deficiencies in both sexes, yeah? But the deficiency in the female is what's made up for in the male, and the deficiency in the male is what's made up for in the female, hence we complement each other. Now, what is it? Survival and reproduction. Remember how I started to talk with that? Now, this is generally the case. A woman needs a man for survival. Needs. While a man wants a woman for reproduction. That's an inescapable truth. And so, therefore, the complementarity, that when the two sexes get together, they can both ensure that general, that primitive trope of an organism's desire for survival and reproduction. So, hopefully that may have convinced some people, maybe at least shed some light. Yeah. Inshallah khair. Yeah. Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah.